Well, hello, everyone. I'm Clement Chen, and I'm one of the advisory board members on the William and Mary APIM Association. And glad to be with you here today. The One of the things that I really love about William and Mary and our family is all in. The wife was graduated from law school. My older son's here today. Younger son graduated from undergrad, and I did my MBA at William and Mary. And what we really enjoy is the celebration, the value of the uniqueness and interesting passions and interests of the students and alumni there. And today, speaking of unique and non-traditional paths and interests, we have my older son, Nate, who's going to give us a sense of how things unfolded with his interest in motorsports and how it dovetailed with his finance and business career. So, so Nate, welcome. Why don't you give a thumbnail sketch to the audience about your time at William and Mary and how it kind of started you on the path?
Yeah, no, thanks so much, Dad, for that. So I went to William and Mary and graduated in the class of 2016 with a finance degree and a concentration in entrepreneurship. I then started my career in investment banking at Stephens Inc. and then switched to private equity. Worked with Enlightenment Capital for roughly 3 years, doing defense and government services investing. And then I went to IMB Partners and stood up their government services vertical. And actually, very recently, stepped out on my own and started my own independent sponsor called Blue Fire Equity. So it's a very similar thesis to what I've done in terms of the investing side of things. All defense and government services focused. Now, the other side of the more exciting part of my life is definitely the racing. I've been passionate about it ever since I can remember. You introduced me to Speed Racer, the anime cartoon from Japan that you watched growing up. And then I also watched growing up. I remember being obsessed with those VHS tapes and then playing with toy cars. I mean, you took me to my first races, which was NASCAR back in the day. I mean, there were no other motorsports that were popular in this country back then. F1 was a European thing. Drifting didn't even really exist. And so I just loved the imagery of the drivers, on the podium and celebrating. And I thought that looked really cool. They're driving awesome cars that sounded really cool and moved really fast. So that's kind of where the genesis of the racing passion started from. So it's been with me pretty much my entire life. When I was 13, you took me to Formula Drift, which is the series that I compete in now. And I remember looking around and kind of realizing that, hey, this isn't as crazy as NASCAR or Formula One is in terms of cost and, all of the effort it takes to being a driver. Back then, the Formula Drift was a lot smaller of a series, and you had, some top tier programs, and then you also had some guys on open trailers, right? And so it looked like there was an opportunity for me to pursue a professional racing career just based on, hey, this doesn't look super, super hard to get into. Now, I don't know if that's true or today, because it's definitely grown a lot, but I think that's where the impetus kind of came from and belief that, hey, I think I can do this. And since age 13, I've sort of centered my life around figuring out a path to getting there.
That's pretty cool. We'll swing back to that, but I know when you were at William and Mary, you did a bunch of different things. You were doing DJing and bartending and videography and drifting, of course. I mean,
Yep.
so you had like a whole wide range of interests and stuff.
I look, I'm the type of person that once I get an idea in my head of I really want to do this, I just become obsessive about it and I just kind of, hammer the nail until it's in the coffin, I guess. I don't know if that's a great analogy, but so a lot of those interests came from an idea or a moment in my life where I thought something was really interesting and I just wanted to pursue it. The DJing came from a trip that you took me on, actually. It was our first time in Miami. We were staying at the Fountain Blue, which is my favorite hotel. And in the Fountain Blue, there's a very popular nightclub called Live. And I was 16 at the time, had never been exposed to nightlife or anything like that, and did not go into the club because I was not, 21 or whatever. But what I did do was I bumped into a middle school friend of mine, and we were wandering around the lobby at like 10 o'clock at night. And that night, Avicii was playing, and there were just a ton of really attractive people, both women and men dressed to the nines, and I was like, what the hell is this? Like, I want to, this looks cool. So then I was a nerd about it, just like everything else that I do in my life. Googled it, found like videos of Avicii playing at the club, and was like, wow, that looks awesome. Like everyone's dancing and having a lot of fun, and the DJ is like driving the atmosphere. So that's why I wanted to learn how to DJ. So I made my freshman roommates in DuPont, stand or I would stand behind my dresser and play my little crappy EDM mixes and, with a laptop and pretend I was Avicii with my, Christmas lights in my dorm and stuff on Friday nights or whatever. But luckily I did end up getting to DJ for real by walking into the Greenleaf when I was a sophomore and say, hey, like I know you guys hire DJs on Thursdays. Here's kind of the vision of how I want to what I want to do. And oh, I've DJ'd in DC. Yeah, that was a little bit of a lie. I had DJ'd once in DC and opened for a friend who was actually in the racing world that I worked for as a videographer anyway. So, the gentleman that gave me a shot just, he brought me on, let me have my like Thursday, nights, and I called them Miami nights or whatever at the Greenleaf on Thursdays, and I DJ'd there from sophomore to senior year, and it was a blast. And then there was one night where I talked about I love making cocktails. I may have taught myself how to make mojitos at a unnamed age, but uh, I talked about my passion for making drinks. And that's how I became a bartender at Greenleaf towards my senior year. So I just go all in on things that I'm passionate about and have an interest in, and it leads me to some pretty cool places and experiences.
That's pretty cool. I guess the lesson learned for me and any parent is be careful what you introduce your kids to because there's always these unintended
I
consequences.
know it's all your fault. All the racing stuff, the DJ, and it's all your fault.
Well, I remember, golly, I think it was 2006 when Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift came out, and I remember taking you to the movie to see it, and then you come out of there saying, "Dad, I'm gonna do that when I grow up," and I was kind of like, follow your passions, follow your dreams, all that kind of nonsense. I didn't think you were actually going to do it.
I know. Well, that's a common theme too. It's fun. I mean, I think when it comes to being an entrepreneur or having a belief in a passion that may not immediately look profitable or whatever, fruitful, I think you just have to kind of tell, people like you to shut up or ignore them and and just kind of do it. You know what I mean? So it was funny. I caught up with a friend in New York who kind of said the same thing. He was like, "Yeah, you talked about this race car stuff, but all I knew you as like as finance dork, straight out of school, working 100 hours a week, and yeah, and you're gonna go do this racing thing? Like it seems ridiculous, but it all makes sense in my head. And all of these things, the DJing, the bartending, the racing, the finance stuff, it actually is all interconnected in a way, and happy to go into that. But it's been really cool to apply basically kind of the same method in terms of how I approach something I really want to pursue and then trying to master it.
Yeah, no, it's really cool, and um, not only as a parent but as a third party looking out from the outside looking in, it's pretty incredible what you've been able to do. And I'll let everyone know that hey, the race car gene skipped a generation. I've got absolutely zero aptitude, knowledge, or anything. So anything in these pro motorsports activities is all me from A
Well,
to
the fun fact is I taught you how to drive stick.
you
So,
did. I know that's kind of strange, isn't it?
right.
Yeah, it was kind of it's kind of like I guess in reverse, but it was still pretty cool. So why don't you give the folks a sense of, once you started getting in your head, hey, this is something that you might really be able to do. Kind of map out the path of how you did there, how you got there, because motorsports, it typically is for lack of a better term, a family business handed down from generation to generation. People that have been ensconced in it for forever, and you're coming at it from a standing start. And so, why don't you give folks a sense of how you're able to carve out a path like that, which is incredibly unusual for someone of your background, going to William and Mary and being in a professional setting with finance and business, and then also doing this this other really exciting area of activity, but not in the traditional flow of things.
Right. And I mean, to make it difficult, I think I decided this when I was like 13 or 14. So, you don't have any resources, you're unemployed, right? You're a student. The way I broke into the industry, because I wanted to be more than just a spectator, right? Barrier to entry to being a spectator just is a cost of a ticket. Barrier of entry to being a driver is having a car. So, something in between that to me was picking up the video camera and shooting media. At the time, there weren't very many people doing it. YouTube was barely a thing, back then. And so I saw an opportunity where drivers wanted content of themselves because who doesn't like watching yourself, do some cool stuff in a car, right? And because there was nobody there to do it, I was de facto one of one kind of at these local events. So I bartered my video stuff for ride-alongs with drivers, and that was the way I broke into it. Fast forward a year, I was shooting professionally. You took me to the D1 Grand Prix, which was a professional racing series, and I got my media pass by just sending an email saying, "Hey, I want a media pass," and I did it. I didn't sound like a 15-year-old or whatever asking for one, and they never asked how old I was, so therefore I got one, right? It's you just kind of find your way in these little loopholes, and you exploit them in the way in any way that you can. So I then went on to shoot Formula Drift in 2010. Is definitely probably not or should not have had a media credential when I was 15. I remember handing them my learner's permit as collateral to get a media vest, and no one said anything. I mean, I always conducted myself in a professional manner. I wasn't there to horse around or hang out. I wanted to do, my job of covering media as best as I could, and that's why I worked with companies at such a young age, as well. Like the people were willing to pay for that. But by the time I was 16, I had saved up $2,000 to buy my first car, which was a 1987 BMW 325i. It was a very basic car, 140 horsepower, which is not very much. And I just took it to the track as is. You all are, you and mom helped out on some safety gear, which was probably a good thing, right? But other than that, like you guys didn't have any involvement on, the parts. So it was like kind of as I could afford more parts, I would put them on the car. I will say we did make a deal that when I got into William and Mary, you would purchase an engine for the car, and then I still had to put it in the car. So that was fun. But, throughout college, I kind of realized, well, if you really want to pursue, professional racing, it's very different than just doing it as a hobby, and you need a lot of money to make that happen. So that's, where I decided instead of being a film major, which was honestly just an easy button for me because I had already a lot of production skills and whatever. Knew I wanted to do something business related, didn't really know what that meant. You wanted me to be an accountant, and I didn't think that was quite as interesting. No offense to any accountants that are listening, but I knew my aptitude for risk was a little bit higher than that, and I went to a finance academy event, realized that Wall Street was an option, and to me, there was there was only two options. It was either Silicon Valley or Wall Street to make the most amount of money that I could out of school. And I didn't consider myself a computer programmer type person, so Wall Street it was. The trade-offs were very clear. It's like, hey, you basically sacrifice 2 years of your life to work insane hours, but at the end of it, it puts you on a great career path where I could afford the lifestyle that I wanted. I also got to do something that was really interesting, and eventually it would lead me to a path to being, instead of being the broker or the investment bank, to being on the investing side and helping to build and scale businesses, which I am very passionate about.
It's really cool. I mean, what's amazing is your path was nonlinear, so to speak. I mean, when I think about what you're talking about, the videography stuff. In fact, I remember this pretty clearly. You started filming these events, and you started posting them on Vimeo at the time, which was sort of the platform for video distribution. And you started getting a pretty interesting following because I remember taking you to one of those events. It was in Wall Speedway, I think, or somewhere. But you started going into the paddock area, and all these people are saying, "Hey, you're the kid. You're the kid that does that filming." Meanwhile, the old man's just sitting there humping all your camera gear, walking around behind you, like crazy. But you kind of segued from the videography, and I think some professional drag racing teams hired you to film for them and do all this stuff. And then you were able to, I don't know that anyone has ever pivoted from the moving from videography into actually being a driver in the motorsport. That's
Yep.
a pretty unusual pivot.
Yeah, I mean, there have definitely been some crew members that have worked on cars and they've gone on to become drivers, but I think I'm the first to go from the media side of things because it's a very different skill set. I mean, even if you're working on the car, that's more related or that's more closer to actually driving the car than being a media person. But I knew where my strengths were and I just played to that. Like working on cars has never been a strength of mine. I do it. I was changing the brakes on my freshman hallmate's car yesterday in your garage, which was kind of funny. But yeah, I'm not a pro mechanic. I just know I can, turn a wrench a little bit. Not particularly a fan of doing that. But on the media side of things, I did have like part of my brain is creative, and it's really fun, like assembling clips together, editing and trying to tell a story through that. So it's what I could do. So that's my value add to the drifting community, and that's why people started paying attention.
Yeah. So so you compete on Formula D, Formula Drift, and I guess you're getting ready to start your fourth year, or is that
Fifth,
yeah,
fifth year.
fourth,
Yep.
fifth year on the pro circuit. Why don't you give folks a sense of what Formula D is about and how's that whole experience been? I mean, that's something that most people don't really have a feel for, or more than likely not experience it firsthand in their lives.
Yeah, so Formula Drift, even though it sounds like Formula One, it's very, very different. It's not a series about who crosses the finish line first. It's more about precision driving. So the cars are going sideways the entire time. There's a lot of smoke you can't see. And basically, the format of the competition is fairly straightforward. You have two cars on the track at a time. One's leading, one's chasing. The lead car is trying to put the car in all of the right places, which are outlined by boxes or little lines on the track that the judges predetermine. And the chase car is trying to get as close as possible to the lead and mimic them in every single way without hitting them, straightening out, or messing up behind them. And then you swap places. So the lead car becomes the chase car becomes lead car. And then there are three judges who vote on who decides, who wins. And then it's like a top 32 March Madness style bracket. I drive an 820 horsepower Toyota 86, and it has a Chevy engine, a BMW steering rack, and it's a Toyota body. So there's no affinity for me right now as a non-factory backed driver in terms of what makes the most sense. I just love to drive a very competitive machine, and I love being on the podium. And whatever combination of manufacturers gets me there, or if Toyota, GM, Hyundai, Honda, I would love to talk with y'all and have an opinion on which manufacturer is the best. But drifting is all very specific in terms of the cars that we drive. They may look like something that you could buy at a dealership, but in reality, the only things left that haven't been changed on my car are the windshield and the roof at this point. So everything is just, torn down and rebuilt and re-engineered from the ground up.
Yeah, I've always thought of Formula D as X Games meets high performance motorsports. It has a certain feel to it that is very unusual for a motorsport, which frankly, some of the motorsports like NASCAR, it's pretty thrilling like for the first 15 minutes, and then it's a little bit monotonous because they're all just turning left, essentially. And
Yeah, I mean, I'd argue drifting is the most exciting spectator motorsport because you never know what's going to happen. F1 for the past couple of years has been pretty, all right, you already know who's going to win like the joke is we only focus on who comes in second or third because, Red Bull's going to win again, right? So in
right.
drifting, you can have the highest caliber, highest budgeted team guy that or girl just lose because they made a mistake, right? And it's not dependent upon spending the most money or whatever. And actually, that's why some manufacturers get scared. Especially some of the European ones, they can't just outspend their competitors and expect a result. They actually have a little bit of luck in there that can throw them off, and that's why they don't want to invest in something they can't guarantee themselves a win. So it's a really interesting motorsport. There's action the entire time. You have no idea what's going to happen. I mean, there are some rounds where, the four-time champion gets knocked out in the top 32, and who would have predicted that? So it can be pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's just for the audience, Formula D, it does compete in various venues nationally. So for a lot of William and Mary alumni are living in the Washington metropolitan area, Maryland, Virginia. I think the nearest place where Formula D competes to the DMV area is in New Jersey. And I think that'll be in June. If folks are interested in coming out and checking it out. It is, I guarantee it's like nothing you've never ever seen before. And it's quite the competitions are quite all consuming. I mean, it takes place over a period of days and really long days. How do you maintain the focus when you deal with so many different distractions relative to a popular motorsport with so many different demands and obligations for your time?
I think it takes a lot of experience and just knowing how to allocate time to certain things. So my first year, I think I got heat stroke every single time because I was trying to interact with people the entire time. I wasn't taking care of myself from a hydration standpoint, and it was horrible, right? So after learning how to manage your time, like when to go sit in the AC. Actually, the first year I didn't even have that option because we were just in a pit area with no trailer, no, I mean, it was like our stuff was on somebody else's trailer. We're just out in the elements, and it can get really, really hot. And when you say long days, what the schedule is, we get there on Wednesday, it's setup day. You fly in from somewhere, you land around lunchtime, you go to the grocery store, make sure you get all the waters and ice and all that, and then you're there till like 8 or 9 o'clock, making sure the car's all good, setting up the pit area, all this stuff, and then you go home, sleep at the Airbnb, wake up first, crack of dawn the next morning. You're there for another 11 hours, and then you're there another 12 hours the next day, and then another 12 hours after that. So it is super intense, and you just have to learn how to take a break sometimes, get hydrate or stay hydrated, and just understand to maybe it's okay that you don't interact with people the entire time, but then when you do interact with people, like my halftime show, which is kind of bringing in some of those DJ skills, actually, that's like the high energy, high focus, like you're on stage for then, but then, gotta kind of rest. And obviously the driving on the track is super important, but that's tough as well. Like I would say most of the time, when I'm on track, I'm actually just sitting in line waiting to go. And then the runs themselves are, 30 seconds to a minute long. So you just have to, mentally prepare yourself and know when to take breaks. And it's tough, but, I think it just gets easier as time goes on.
Yeah, I had always marveled. I remember the one year you were um, spotting for a driver in another division. You were driving in your own division, and you were still also working really hard on certain deals. And so I wasn't sure how you could keep
No,
up.
that was terrible. That was the one
That was,
time my racing conflicted with my finance world was July of 2023. St. Louis, also the notoriously hottest round of the year. It's 100 degrees out every single day. Humidity is way worse than the DC area and Williamsburg, which didn't know that was possible. But anyway, we were closing a deal in my other career that Monday. So that meant like leading up to a deal, the week before is always terrible. All those like little outstanding, death by a thousand cuts in terms of diligence items or legal things that need to be signed, whatever. It's all left to the last week. And then there's this mad dash where you're pulling consistent, 14, 16-hour days to just get the deal across the line. And that happens in every single M&A transaction. It just happened to happen the same weekend as Formula Drift St. Louis. So I was spotting, I was driving, and then I was also working. I honestly kind of was not a very good spotter that weekend because I was too busy working. They're like, "Oh, did you even see his run?" I was like, yeah, he did good. All right." And they were like, "Yeah." So it was not great, and even driving definitely suffered. I mean, my first practice lap, I managed to crash the car. Not bad, but that's something I never usually do, and it was really tough. So I mean, that because of that weekend, I decided to step away from spotting because I'm pretty good at it. I'm good at being analytical. I'm good at relaying feedback to a driver. And the incentive for me was a partial sponsorship for something that I still need, and I just knew that it would be painful. It's painful to give it up, but at the same time, it was holding me back from being able to really focus my time and efforts to my driving, which should come first, and not spotting for somebody else's program. So it was a tough decision, and it definitely added cost to the program, but it also improved results as part of that. So it's just it's a constant juggling act, and frankly there is no balance in my life. I'm always doing something. Yeah, I mean, like yesterday I was fixing my friend's car, and then I went to this conference thing, and then had this other networking thing afterwards. So it's constant circus of activity, right? And then next week I'm gonna have to go to Albuquerque, or have like a work happy hour thing that I'm hosting, and then I have a management presentation in New Mexico that now I'm going to, that I need to book flights for, and we're not even in the racing season yet. So this is supposed to be the calmest time of the year. During racing season, there will be probably, or I just did my schedule. I think there's like 5 weekends in a row of being on the road somewhere. During the week I'm here, but I still need to get done, the day career stuff. And I think, well, I mean, look, my personality lends itself to always being active. I always like to be doing something. And I think you just have to focus on finding things that re-energize you. So, for me, that's DJing. I have my DJ set up over here. If I need a break from business related stuff, I'll just start playing music and go into my happy place. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's
So,
it's still thinking. Like there's still a lot of brain power being used, but it's a completely different aspect. And so that's kind of how I handle, you know, balancing out all the activity with being able to stay sane, I guess. That
yeah.
and TV. I love watching shows and just kind of escaping reality for a little bit, and that kind of thing too.
Yeah, I've always I thought it was pretty interesting the kind of convergence that you have in some of the things you've been doing with your career. You alluded to this halftime show, and then your DJ skills. One, I want you to talk a little about what that is, but how it dovetails with your DJing skills, the marketing sponsorship aspect of things, with the race driving things. Why don't you give folks a sense of that?
Yeah, so I think the coolest thing about, you know, utilizing, especially I would say the finance career as well as the business side of the racing stuff, was that, in your early 20s, your only value to an investment bank is your ability to work insane hours. I mean, at that point, you're fresh out of school, you think you have some skills, you very quickly realize, no, you don't, so you really have to like claw your way up. And you're the Excel monkey, the PowerPoint jockey, whatever, and that's your value. But the job does shift as you get into the middle of your career, and you have to go from being the person behind the desk to the person being out there and trying to convince people to work with you from a deal standpoint, from a relationship standpoint, et cetera. And those are two very different jobs. And that transition is very difficult for a lot of people to be able to do because they're completely different skill sets. The best analyst is not necessarily going to be your rainmaker, investment banker, private equity deal guy, right? So what racing did though was it made me learn that skill set of being able to network and talk with people before I had that opportunity in my finance world. So you have to do that in racing because you need sponsorship and you need to be able to tell your story, convince people why your platform makes sense for theirs, and how it comes together and et cetera. So, like going to trade shows and that kind of thing definitely overwhelmed me at first, but I got the opportunity to do that in racing. And because, it's a lot of people in a convention center type room, yeah, it's overwhelming, right? But when I started going to those things in the finance side of what I do, it felt less jarring and more like, okay, I've done a little bit of this before. Let me just kind of parlay that skill set. And so it kind of went hand in hand. Um, Also, it went hand in hand the opposite way in terms of I understand how businesses work. I understand the organization layout, the motivation behind why different departments do certain things. And that all came from the finance skill set. So it's kind of funny how, both of them ping ponged and helped me get to places faster because I had an outside perspective that neither one of them had, if that makes sense. Like the racing business people are definitely interested in the finance side of what I do because it's something they don't have exposure to, but they see it a lot in their industry because there are private equity companies coming in, buying up other competitors or whatever, and people don't, if you don't have a background in it, you don't really understand what's going on. And, consequentially, in the finance side of things, like the last thing you want to talk about at a networking event is, oh, oh, okay, you went to the golf course last weekend. It's like, yeah, well, I just, won a race. And that's immediately more interesting, more easier to remember. Like, oh, Nate's the guy. Wow, you race like and do this. Like that's, it's memorable, right? So, it's been really cool to have both. And I think that's made me stronger as a person overall, just having a diversified set of skills, which I think William and Mary does a great job at doing, right? It's not just about being a hard sciences person. It's about the liberal arts education that gives you a well-roundedness that I feel like I embody. So, in terms of the halftime show, the genesis of that marketing idea came from another driver that I look up to, Vaughn Gittin. He is probably the most successful financially professional drifter in the world, period, of all time. He's done some really amazing things with Ford. They actually put a drifting handbrake in their Mustangs that they sell new because of him. So anyway, really inspiring, very entrepreneurial guy. I have a great relationship with him. I saw he did a halftime show that could have been improved. He was doing, he'd have like a one of those like bullhorn things and would kind of throw some stuff out and it was kind of like yeah I'm like hanging out like interacting with the crowd and I mean his name alone like carries a lot of clout and et cetera, so that wasn't hard to get the audience in front of him. But what I saw as an opportunity was, hey, what if I wrapped this idea with my style of production that I had from being a DJ? We're going to bring in speakers and I'll make a DJ mix and then I'll get on the microphone, and that was kind of the impetus of that idea. And over time it's evolved to, okay, let's get other drivers involved, let's do a Q&A style thing like what F1 does at some of their events with the drivers, because the audience wants to hear what it's like being a race car driver. Who doesn't, right? It's a kind of interesting, like, oh well, that's kind of cool, like what is it actually like? And so we tosses and then we plug our sponsors organically. For example, like I'll ask the audience like, "Hey, what's your favorite Moroso part?" Because there's literally like several thousand SKUs that Moroso makes, and it's a family-owned business in Connecticut. And we'll ask and tailor questions to that. We'll also do some audience engagement games like water bottle chugging because it's hot in St. Louis and that kind of thing. So anyway, all of that stuff came from having a background in the DJ stuff, and it's really fun. It's the biggest halftime show in Formula Drift by a mile, and it's a great time.
Yeah, so I mean, when you think about the marketing aspects of things, so racing's a part of it, but the marketing of it, the sponsorships, but also it's one of the most customer friendly motorsport because the access to the drivers, to the paddock area and everything else it's pretty amazing. And speaking of that, it's you were at the DC Auto Show in January. It was this was actually kind of amazing because back when you were young, um, um, your mom and me would take you to the DC Auto Show, and it was basically the annual trek to the pilgrimage to the DC Auto Show, and then after crawling around all the cars, the family would get sick. So it's like our annual get sick sort of opportunity. And there are these pictures of you in front of all these little race cars, and it was kind of really cool to see, this past year, your car's actually there. And so there's what is your how do you feel about the intense custom fan interaction that actually comes with the territory? Is that fun? Is that a hassle? Is that an obligation? Or what's your sense of that?
No, I love it. I love that Formula Drift is open paddock versus other motorsports that just aren't. So fans can come up to you and talk about, how did you get into it? Ask technical questions around the car. I definitely get more excited when people ask things that I don't just talk about all day, but I mean, I'm happy to do it, right? I'm happy to share the passion that I have for motorsports with as many people as possible because I want as many people as possible to be interested in. And I love how Formula One has marketed their product to, a viewership that can't tell you the difference between engine and transmission and a differential. So they made the most technically complex motorsport that is in the world, and they created a product off of that that is understandable by as like almost everyone, right? Which is great. And I think Formula Drift needs to do more of that because I think we have a visually more entertaining motorsport than F1, and we don't do as good of a job at that. And so, with that being said, I try to do that every time I interact with people, especially at the DC Auto Show. They don't necessarily know about drifting. I actually was surprised that there were some Formula Drift fans knew exactly who I was, knew what Formula Drift was, and that's an awesome like, hey, you have a diehard fan get to have maybe a deeper level conversation or like, oh yeah, what do you think is going to happen this year kind of stuff versus oh, this is what drifting is. Here's my car and here's who I am, that kind of thing. So I really do love interacting with the fans. With that being said, I will be honest and say after every one of those autograph signings, I came home and I would watch something on the couch for like 20 minutes and then I would pass out because it was pretty exhausting.
Oh yeah. Oh, it
So
is.
so yeah, I mean it's great. I mean, I think I ended up signing like 700 autographs throughout the 2 weekends that I was at the show and present and talking with people.
Oh yeah, no, it was quite an event and very popular. Folks really enjoyed talking to you and seeing the car and everything. So help us enjoy vicariously what it is like to drift. So when you're actually out there putting the throttle down or whatever, what does all that feel like?
I always like to describe it as, your own roller coaster that you get to control, but hopefully you're not going upside down, So,
Yeah.
but it really does feel pretty intense. Like the G-forces that you're experiencing are, pushing you back in the seat and, it's everything kind of comes at you fast. You feel like you're gonna die, I guess, which is the feeling. That feeling is something you have to suppress in order to just, it's very if you're driving at the professional level, you just have to focus on hitting your marks and kind of take the excitement out of it and just. But I will say, like, I do get very passionate on the mic to my team, especially if I know like I beat somebody. I'm like, it's the competitive nature of my personality comes out a lot, and I get fired up. Right, like I don't care who you are. I just want to win. Like I want to beat you in like an honorable way. Of course, there's no like trying to cheat or drive dirty or anything like that. But it's I don't, if I competed against you, I would want to rip your head off because that's just the nature of the competitor of who I am. But it's awesome. I love the pressure. I love the competitive aspect of drifting, and that's what I live for. Like that's what motor. You can't have a motorsport that's not competitive. That kind of defeats the whole purpose of the name sport, right? So I understand, like doing it recreationally is fun. Um, and all, but the competitive nature is what really excites me and drives me to keep going.
Yeah, and I'll have to say you've taken me on hops in the passenger side, and I'll have to tell you, everybody, it is more exciting than any roller coaster or whatever ride you can ever possibly go on. One, it's real. Two, it's just exhilarating and frightening all at once. If you're not strapped down in the harness, you're flying out the window. And it's amazing because when you go to a lot of these racing events, I guess that's what you would call them, people are willing to shell out $150 for a single lap to experience what it's like. And it's pretty incredible. Um, I think there's a few questions from the audience that we'll get to in 1 second. I just wanted to ask you one more question before we pivot over to the questions from the audience. Um, clearly you've done so many different things and your background is so eclectic in terms of all the things that you've been doing. But what advice would you give to William and Mary alumni that, have a non-traditional area of interest or passion that, they may or may not be able to see their way to doing it professionally or whatever? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you want to explore something, like don't be afraid to. I didn't know anybody going into the drifting community at age 14, and I don't know what every community is like, but drifting especially is very open, right? Like if you don't know anybody, just start talking to people, and everyone wants the sport to grow. So everyone's very open to having a conversation. I've definitely had a lot of people, DM me and ask, "Hey, how did you get into it? Oh, or I just bought this car. What do I need to do?" And I always answer those questions. And even for some of the people that are, more into it already and have some like deeper technical questions of like, "Hey, how do I make this setup with this company work or whatever?" And there is one company that I am the bearer of bad news because they buy the part, and then what the company doesn't tell them is you actually have to modify a lot of stuff to actually make it work. And I'm like, I don't know why they keep sending me, like, the company could just tell the customers themselves. But anyway, happy to answer all the questions, and I do. So I think if you're just trying to get into something that seems like it's impossible to get into, I mean, the great thing about now is just, you can Google your way to an answer on how to start. And then it just becomes, do you have, the work ethic to commit to it?
Right. And it's not necessarily a linear path. It tends to be somewhat circuitous at times, and you just got to keep adapting.
And I would say, regardless of what it actually is, I think the biggest value that you can bring to the table is having different perspectives converge into one thing. So when you take, lessons learned from, um, you know, one area and apply it to another, it creates some magic because, likely, like, okay, for example, Formula One, the reason why it's so big is because executives from ESPN got brought on after Liberty Media purchased the company in 2017 or 26, whenever it was, and they applied a lot of their knowledge on how sports works to traditionally just European thing, right? And one of them came up with the idea of having a Netflix show, and look what that is opened up the market to this country, which never could have been tapped into before. Like F1 had tried to come here and was never able to grab the attention of this audience. And now, like, that's all I hear about. Like people just talk about F1 left and right. And there's a little bit of me that's a little jealous. Like I would rather them, I see a McLaren shirt walking around DC. Why don't they have an HN shirt? You know what I mean? So, but I look like, and especially now, like if I had the opportunity to, change how Formula Drift was operated, it would be to just copy, like, don't reinvent the wheel, right?
Yeah,
Copy what works from something that's very similar and apply it to what you're doing, and you'll see really great results from that.
yeah. Great. Thanks, Nate. I'm going to pivot over to some questions from the audience. So, first is, have you ever gotten hurt drifting?
Yeah, luckily not. There may have been one small incident last year. So drifting
Well,
is a
you had
lot.
you had that crazy wreck in Irwindale, California, the
Oh
first.
yeah. Well, I mean that looked crazier than it actually was. So the thing with drifting is we're going a lot slower than your F1 or your NASCAR. We're not going anywhere close to 200 miles an hour. I think the fastest I've gone sideways is 122, which is still pretty fast.
Well,
But
pretty fast because you're
yeah, going sideways. Yeah,
sideways.
going sideways. Yeah. On purpose too, I should add. But, so I've definitely, been in a bunch of I think every competition I did last year, somebody smashed into me, but I've never been seriously injured, and nobody has ever died drifting on the professional level. So I mean, I might have gotten a small concussion last year, and that was just, unfortunate. It is a little scary. I will say it's a little scary because most times when you crash, you can kind of see it coming and brace yourself. For this particular incident, I was looking, forward and ahead of me, and I didn't see the guy smash into me. And then when he did, suddenly it just feels like you get sucker punched in the face because you're not. There's no seeing, this fist over here, and then my head hit the roll cage. And even though I'm wearing a helmet and the roll cage is padded and stuff, it was still hard enough and a weird enough hit that it did make me feel not so great kind of later that day.
Yeah, I may have been slightly concussed. Gotcha. Next question. What question do you feel like you're being asked most frequently?
How did you get into it and that kind of thing? So I think I answered that one already.
Okay, I gotcha. And also, what does the Formula D racing season look like in terms of
So
what time of year?
Formula Drift's Pro Spec is only 4 rounds, but with that being said, I end up on the road 23 to 25 weekends a year. And the filler between that is another competition series that I do in Englishtown, New Jersey called The Gambler, which it's a great series. Ironically, the payout is actually larger than the pro stuff that I do, and I won the championship last year, so that was really awesome. And the level of driving of that series is really, really good. The other people on the podium um, for the championship last year were also pro drivers as well. So that series is great practice because there are only four pro competitions that I do. And then in addition to that, I'm doing these hybrid music festival slash motorsport festival events like Hyperfest and Grid Life. So it's a combination of music and then, more like ride along demo type stuff. So a little less stress and pressure, and more about having fun, which is kind of cool. And then I will do Drift Appalachia, which is a really unique experience where they actually shut down some mountain roads in Kentucky and West Virginia, and we get to drive on them. By far the scariest thing I've done because it's a public road, so it's not a purpose-built race course with lots of safety. There's cliffs, there's big things to drop off of, and it's insane and very, very scary. Really cool. And one thing that I did last year and I'm going to do this year too is All American Week at Fort Bragg. Now, I guess they just renamed it again in North Carolina. And that's especially meaningful because your father, my grandfather, was actually a Army Airborne Ranger and he served at that military base. So giving active duty troops ride-alongs is a really great way to give back. And then, your background is that you went to the Naval Academy and were a Naval Academy officer. My mom was a Navy nurse. My other grandfather was also the Navy. So really supportive of the military. I myself did not serve, but it's a cause that I firmly believe in. And so being able to be a part of that All American Week, which is basically a troop morale booster event, is awesome. And I love doing it.
That's great. So how can folks follow you or get in touch with you, if they're kind of interested in this kind of stuff?
Yeah, so my social media handles are at nathaniel.chen on Instagram, Nate Chen Racing on Facebook, and Nate Chen on YouTube, and Nate.chen on TikTok. So I would say Instagram is definitely the easiest place to see what I'm up to. Um, I think somebody had a question about diversity that I thought was really interesting. So I would say drifting was actually, especially when I got in, and I looked up, I actually kind of ran some numbers because I was curious. When I got into the sport in 2007, I think as many or as much as like 45% of the drivers were of a diverse background, which I thought was really, really cool. And the reason for that is because drifting is a Japanese motorsport that originated in Japan. And in the early years of professional drifting, a significant number of Japanese drivers came over and they were the de facto, had a huge advantage because they had spent a lot of time in the sport. And in this country, the sport had only been around for a couple of years. So I think seeing people that look like you when you're growing up is definitely very inspiring because it shows that at a very basic level, oh, well, someone that looks kind of like me can do this. Like, why not? And so I thought that was really powerful. I will say, like, nowadays the number of Japanese drivers and the importance of Japan has definitely decreased significantly. They did not keep up with the times in terms of technology with the cars and the components, and so their place in drifting, although they were the pioneers of the sport, they are not as important as the Formula Drift is today, for example, because Formula Drift is the premier professional racing series for drifting in the world. There's others that are spread throughout, but all drivers basically from all backgrounds come to here. And so today I think that number has gone down to maybe 15-16% have diverse backgrounds. But at the same time, there are also more women in the sport than there were in 2007. And yeah, it is a really interesting dynamic to see. So I appreciate that question.
Oh, that's great. Um, that's uh, that's about all I have. If there's nothing else from the audience.
Can I ask a question? I'm on the phone, so I can
Sure.
type really easily. Sorry. And so, uh, and hi, and
Hi, Rain.
hi, and this is Rain, and we're in the same APIM board, and this is a very fantastic talk. I would say I'm inspired by you and your very organic and authentic relationship with your son, Nate. Hi, Nate. Nice to meet you.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Uh, and your description of how you started this at a very young age and just go with it, and that is actually very interesting because a lot of people wouldn't do it because they wouldn't think like, oh, that's scary, that's not for me. So is that just natural or is actually you copy from your dad's personality? I want to be a bartender, I will be a bartender. I want to be a DJ, I will be a DJ.
I mean, I think the one word answer is I think we're both stubborn. So, so, so there you go. Um, so yeah, I think that's honestly the stubbornness. And I know I inherited that from my grandfather. Actually, there's a really funny story. So grandfather, my dad's dad was an entrepreneur who ran a small business for a number of years. It did okay. It didn't grow a whole lot, but it also didn't decline a whole lot. But his one of my favorite sayings of his was always like, "We go to public." He was like he wanted to be to go to public, do an IPO, which was probably never going to happen for the small business that he ran. But that belief in yourself and unwillingness to heed to conform to norms and all of that, I think that's probably where I get a lot of the chutzpah to just go out and do things that others would say, oh, that's too risky, or I'm too scared of failure, or something like that. So I think any entrepreneur has to have a little bit of craziness to them in order to succeed or to even try. And if you aren't going to try, then you're definitely not going to succeed.
Totally agree. And so the entrepreneurship, I guess, mindset is helping you, and it's also runs in the family. That's a plus. And actually, I'm an entrepreneur myself as well, so I can sort of see that. And another note is, I think Jenny is looking for a DJ for her next event. I don't know if you will be interested, but that would be a great opportunity. And if it's in DC, hopefully, one day we could meet in person.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Would love to get back to DJing, and yeah, happy to get coffee or something like that anytime you're up here or you're in DC. Yeah, would love to connect.
Yeah, I'm currently in William Mary. I'm a faculty
Oh, okay, cool.
in William Mary. Yes.
Got it.
Thank you.
We
Thanks,
can
Ryan.
thank you, Rand, for that plug. And thank you, Clement and Nate, so much. This was so enjoyable and so fun to listen to. It was a good thing that I was on mute because I was laughing the whole time. Um, I want to thank everybody else too again for joining us, and I will send this recording out. It will be posted on the webinar page on William and Mary sometime in the near future. Any other questions or anything before we let everyone go?
No, just thank you, Jenny, so much for putting this, together. This is amazing.
Well, you all are great, and I'm excited to see some of you in person again soon. So stay warm and stay safe, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for putting it together, Jenny.
Thanks so much. Have
Thanks
a
for
good
joining us,
one.
Nate.
Bye,
Thanks.
everyone.
See
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.